Day after day, I'm checking and seeing no updates to find out when would this motherfucker finally be facing the music to be held accountable for unaliving Elijah Hadley. Yes, y'all remember Elijah Hadley, and y'all better not have forgotten that 17-year-old young man that was walking down the highway minding his own business at nighttime, and that deputy pulled up Jacob Diaz Austin and unalived him. And I mean not just unalived him, but executed that young man. Yeah, y'all heard exactly what I said, and I'm gonna tell y'all exactly how. And if you have not seen the video footage on it, you need to check it out, but have your heart prepared because it's very heartbreaking and it is hard to watch. Elijah Hadley was just minding his own business like any other teenager would be able to do, and on his way home walking down this highway, somebody passed by Elijah Hadley. When they passed by Elijah Hadley, they decided to call the police for absolutely no reason, but they thought there was a reason, so they called them and said that a welfare check needs to be done on somebody that's walking on the highway. But instead of just pulling up and doing a welfare check on Elijah Hadley, he ended up shooting this young man over 19 times. You heard what I said, and absolutely you're wondering, how can you shoot somebody over 19 times without reloading? Because he goddamn reloaded, exactly like I said. He executed that young man. Let me continue. Elijah Hadley was carrying on minding his own business, walking down the highway when a deputy had pulled up and he had stopped his car a nice distance away from Elijah Hadley. He got out of the vehicle and then he told Elijah Hadley to stop right there, bro. Elijah Hadley halted right then and there. He then told Elijah Hadley to let me see your hands because Elijah Hadley had a shirt, and then he had a BB aerosol thing in his hands, and he had it underneath that shirt, and he was just walking and minding his own business, and he had it for the protection from the wildlife that ends up being out there on that highway, because down there in New Mexico there's a lot of dangerous wildlife, so therefore he had it for protection. Elijah Hadley, I'm sure, panicking that he has this thing in his hand, he thinks that it'd be safer for him to toss it away rather than to try to hold his hands in the air while he has it in his hand, because he didn't want the deputy to think that he was trying to do him no harm. He tosses it away very quickly and in a way where you know that he was not being threatening and or trying to do anything wrong. He was just trying to comply as best that he could with being as safe as he could. The deputy already had his weapon out and everything drawn at Elijah Hadley, already pointed at him and everything, and he already had his finger on the trigger. He quickly released 4 shots at Elijah Hadley, hitting him 4 times, and Elijah Hadley fell to the ground, crying and screaming and bleeding. And this is where it gets even tougher. Elijah Hadley was in the front of this trooper's vehicle, trying to put his hands in the air because the deputy, for minutes, kept screaming at this young man for about a minute and a half to not move, put his hands in the air, and you could tell Elijah Hadley is on that ground, shot and in pain, and trying his best to still comply, and he screamed out after being shot that it's just a BB thing, it's just a BB thing. After continuing to scream demands at Elijah Hadley after this young man has already been shot and wounded on the ground and not running over there to recover the so-called weapon that he felt like Elijah Hadley had, he went inside of his trooper vehicle and started digging around and looking around for over a minute and a half with his back on Elijah Hadley and not checking on this young man, looking at this young man or anything. Oh, and before somebody says that he must have been looking for a med kit or something that he could do to try to help Elijah Hadley, absolutely not, because it took him over a minute and a half, like I said, to even check on Elijah Hadley again. And he had just finished his medical training, and they gave him a certificate and put it all over FB and made it a big deal about him finishing that training, so he should have known exactly where that med kit was at. Not only that, anytime that you feel like somebody is a threat or anything like that, and or they had something threatening to your life, you want to go over there and recover it. And even if you don't go over there to recover it, you never want to take your eyes off of them for over a minute and a half. Yes, Elijah Hadley was still alive and still breathing and still trying to make it. This deputy then runs around the back of his vehicle to go back to the other side of his vehicle, not around the front of his vehicle, but he goes around the back of his vehicle as if he's trying to waste more time. And then it seems like he's trying to waste time to wait for Elijah Hadley to get into a perfect position for him to be able to yell what he yelled out. Stop moving, bro. Don't move. Don't go towards that. And then he started letting off some more shots at Elijah Hadley, barrages of bullets, and then he stopped, and then he let off some more barrages, and then he stopped, he reloaded, and let off some more shots. They are supposed to be down there holding him accountable, and he's supposed to be on his way to facing his charges, but they have yet to taken him to trial just yet. Yes, he's went to court like once or twice, but we waiting on a motherfucking update, because it's about time that motherfucker stopped living his life and being able to live his life and doing what he want to do when Elijah Hadley wasn't even able to see 18, when that young man was supposed to turn 18 about 30-some days after this officer that motherfucking took his life. So how is it that this motherfucker that executed and unalived Elijah Hadley is still out there walking around and being able to live his life and not being inside of this motherfucking courtroom and being held accountable so that way he could be behind bars and being able to serve the time that this motherfucker needs to serve? If this was anybody else that did this to anybody else, trust and believe they would have been behind bars or they would have already been going back and forth to trial and back and forth to court and being held accountable. No, what they want to do is waste time so that way to get off of people's minds. Guess what? We ain't gonna forget. I ain't gonna let people forget. Elijah Hadley and his family still deserves justice, and we ain't gonna let it rest until they get it, because that officer, that deputy, was absolutely wrong and he needs to be held accountable.